You wanna know what I love about the Eminence and Shadow? How season 2 could just casually end with Sid seemingly causing the Big Bang, and you know what? The difference of one character explaining the multiverse and then having Sid casually try to explain things like it's like he casually watches a sci-fi movie and he's just trying to explain such complex subject matter, but really it's just this dude's around here jumping around with bags on his head, slamming people with crowbars. He isn't really gonna explain things in that well of a way. So we're just gonna roll with the punches. Luckily, we aren't just ending season 2 wondering when we're gonna get more. Now, while we don't have a release date, season 2 ends with the confirmation that we are getting an Eminence and Shadow movie, which will be adapting the next arc. And with how season 2 ends with a pretty big cliffhanger of Sid jumping back to his original world, it seems. I mean, it's definitely a bit in the future here, but still, going to be very interesting to see where they take it, and given that we're very close to being caught up with the source material, having a movie rather than just directly going into a shorter season 3 or something is the right way to go about things, so we give time for the source material to get a bit ahead, while also knowing that we are getting more Eminence and Shadow in the process. But this was a very crazy episode, and we have quite a bit to discuss. Now, I do have a full live reaction to today's wonderful final episode over on my Patreon, so if you would like to see that, head on over there, consider supporting. This was a wild episode, and honestly, just the casual way they go about explaining isekai elements that we don't normally touch upon, because usually when, like, characters get summoned to another world, sometimes certain shows do touch upon it a bit more than others, but it's very interesting how they handle it here, because just the casual idea of, you know, pretty much talking about dragons, and we're basically looking at dinosaurs, and just the idea of how they come to and from the disappearance and how things change, but what if humanoid people also had similar things? Because prior to even that being said, I was like, oh, this is probably exactly explaining how Sid got dragged from his world into the Eminence and Shadow world, and the idea of like worlds colliding and overlapping, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I like it when a story doesn't just simply say, okay, Truck-kun comes in, kills character, throws his ass into a new world. I'm fine with that, but the idea that they're actually going about something and having it have a lore and world reason is something that's quite interesting. And all I knew about this episode walking in was that it was going to end on a cliffhanger. And I think the only surprising thing about that statement was usually when I hear about cliffhangers, people get salty because it's like, oh, how could they end it here? For me, I love cliffhangers. If you give me a cliffhanger, I'm more excited to watch the next episode or the next season, or in this case, the next movie, if you give me something that makes me extra hungry for it. So you could have like cut Sid's head off here and then said to be continued, and I would have been equally as excited. But the way they ended it was actually pretty good because it kind of brings it back to the first episode. And at first I wasn't quite sure if they were doing that because, I'll be honest, I haven't watched episode 1 of season 1 in a hot minute, so I'm just kind of going off of my own memories here. And while they can be good, I mean, they're not perfect either. So just the idea of like, oh, I think I recognize this girl. I was like, oh, I think I recognize this building. And I'm like, wait a second, what's going on? At first, my assumption was like, okay, what if because we're talking about different universes, different realities or something, like what if like this is something similar to where he came from, but just like a slight deviation, maybe a little more futuristic. But it does seem like it's probably the one he came from. Like that's my gut hunch right now. I could be mistaken. There's a lot we don't know, and it's going to be fun to explore clearly in the movie him separated from Shadowguard. I'm not sure if Shadowguard is going to come looking for him, if it's just going to be a Sid focused movie towards this stuff, and then he'll pop back up and say, hey bitches, how's it been hanging here? Because honestly, that's Sid for you. I mean, I thought he was going to end the whole world, to be honest. I thought he was going to restart his own world that he was currently in, because he casually launches a fool up into space and goes, I am atomic, and just the idea that I'm like, oh man, look at all the planets behind him. He's going to destroy so much life just for that chuny show. And instead, it seems like he caused a black hole that then sucks him in and throws him back to where he came from. It's a little farther into the future. There's more technology seemingly. I don't know exactly, but it's so interesting how we kind of tie it all together. And it's going to be very fun to see what he does because obviously, you know, them being like, stylish, what are you doing? Like, they're stuttering, they're stammering, like, they're freaking out, they're having PTSD. Girl over here is just basically, I don't know, every time I see characters, I swear they're like one step away from dropping trouser. It doesn't matter if they're family, friend, or the cult member. I just feel like if you're Shadow, if you're Sid, like, this is just gonna happen at this point. And it's gonna be fun to see what they do because overall, this episode did what it needed to. It gets you excited for the future of Eminence and Shadow. It progresses the world and lore and the idea, especially because like we're essentially dealing with like multiverses here, like just multiple worlds, and just the idea of how they overlap and connect and how maybe ideas or powers and technology can come to and from. It's really cool because we were seeing exactly that with Shadowguard and pretty much looking at Sid's world and, you know, what he had to say, and the idea of pretty much turning what should be an isekai fantasy world into a modern Japan looking setting. And now seeing his world, it's like, seems like maybe there's some interesting things being taken maybe to and from. I don't know, but either way, it's a very good episode. It was polished, it was consistent, it was badass. I mean, we essentially have a bunch of dragons roaming around, and while they didn't really cause too much of a ruckus, it was still nice seeing Shadowguard just kick ass and take names, and then just having someone get thrown up into the goddamn sky. Like, he literally calls it out as a boss fight, and then he gets upset that the main characters aren't here. It's like, my boy, the fact that you still don't realize that you're not a background character, you are the main character, is both hilarious and just insufferable, all mixed into one. But this is why Sid's one of my favorite isekai MCs. You never know what you're gonna get with him. You don't know if he's gonna cause casually a black hole to erupt and potentially suck everything in, because here's the thing, that scene could have ended with, you know how sometimes like when universes ended in shows, or like something like you get sucked into a black hole, it's just a character standing in white space, like there's nothing but white surrounding him because there's nothing left in the universe. I was kind of expecting that to happen. I was expecting the whole damn world to get sucked into that black hole, and Sid would just chill there in a white room and be like, wonder where we go from here, and then credits would play. But no, instead, we get something that's kind of tying back to the first episode, and it'll be exciting to see, because I can't really recall the last time I've seen something quite like this. I've seen the idea of like ideas or even characters going to and from worlds and stuff, or even the idea of something like a Dead Mount Death Play and the overlapping of the isekai and the reverse isekai in that case. But the idea of how like it overlaps, especially with the second core that's currently airing. There's a lot to clearly explore with that, and we've seen it, but the idea of exactly how they went about Sid's kind of reversal is something that's a little more unique and takes enough of a deviation to separate itself, while seemingly going to have the fun that we expect from Sid, while keeping the plot, the world, the lore, and just everything like that continuing to flourish. And that's why The Eminence and Shadow is an isekai great. But overall, I would say season 2 definitely impressed me. I mean, it felt like a consistent continuation. I'm glad that we already have a confirmation for a movie. Hopefully the same team's going to be behind this, because one of the big reasons that season 2 was so consistent, and I think it was the director he mentioned, it was, I think, just prior to season 2 dropping, mentioned how they wanted to have a quick turnaround with season 2, or at least be able to immediately start working on season 2, so that the same staff could be behind it, so they would have a consistent production. The fact that we got just as quick of an announcement with the movie says to me that they're probably trying to keep the same staff around, because one, you want consistency, but two, The Eminence and Shadow is a moneymaker. So if you have a consistent team backing you and quick turnarounds in these ways, you're going to have a very happy, not only audience, but also probably team behind them. So it'll be cool to see where they take it. But let me know what you thought of the casual Big Bang and how they ended season 2. Favorite moment, favorite episode, how excited are you for that movie? Let me know down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course ring that bell. And like I mentioned, we have a full live reaction to actually this entire season over on my Patreon if you would like to see that, so head on over there, consider supporting, and hey, while you're over there, you'll also get a video shout out. So today we have Jonathan Bromlow, Purple Kush, Charwick, FCCL, Azop, Eds, and Ben Liu. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.